Hey everyone, you are listening to the Self-Awareness Journey podcast. This little banter is about a car ride long and features your hosts, JJ Parker and Melissa Albers. JJ owns a tech company and Melissa has been a coach working with influencers for the last 18 years. Well, hello everybody. I'm super excited today because we have a very special guest. Yay! Cue the music. We are very lucky enough today to have Alex Morrall here. And Alex is the founder of the Twin Cities Wellness Collective. If you're interested in checking that out, we'll mention it again later, but the Twin City Wellness Collective, it has a large presence on LinkedIn, so it's probably the fastest way that you can find out more about that there. But Alex, welcome to the Self-Awareness Journey pod. We're happy to have you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. It's going to be fun.
So when you and I got a chance to get to know each other just a little bit through a call a couple of weeks ago, you had such an interesting story. I liked that we were able to connect talking about self-awareness. So we were able to connect about some really interesting things that not a lot of business people get into discussions around, right? Just the wellness piece as a whole, the human as a whole. And you had such an amazing personal story. I wondered if we could just start there.
Yeah. Well, I guess part of the reason I got interested in well-being is when I was in college. I was a junior in college, and I was home for winter break. It was like the first day I was home for winter break, and December 13th of 2013. And I got a text from my brother that said there were gunshots in the school. And he was a senior in high school, and then my sister was a sophomore. And so my mom and I were having lunch, and we got this text, and we drove over there, and like the whole our school in Denver is like, it's actually in Littleton, Colorado, which is a suburb of Denver, but it's at a major intersection, and the whole thing was surrounded by emergency vehicles and like big Humvees and all the whole thing. It was like a whole flash flood of emergency lights.
Wow!
And they put us all like over in the parking lot because all these parents started showing up, and they put us in there's a grocery store across the street, and they put us in this parking lot, and we just waited to see if my brother and sister would come out.
Oh my gosh.
Because essentially the shooter was a student, and then he shot another student, and then lit the library on fire and shot himself, it was this like horrible event, and something these events, like, they seem almost common in where I'm from, because of course Columbine is where I grew up, is probably 8 miles from our high school, and it's happened other places nearby as well. So yeah. It's just like a really sad thing.
Yeah, those are like the two. I feel like the Columbine and the Littleton stories were like really the two hallmarks. I always think about them as like the beginning of what's been happening since. Like it is such a shocking, I mean, it is shocking and terrible, but that I feel like was like the first couple of ones, and no one knew how to react or respond. I mean, I don't think we still do, but right. That must have been really scary for your family.
Alex, how long did you guys have to wait before your siblings came out?
Yeah, it was probably 2 or 3 hours at least.
Wow. What a horrible long wait.
Yeah, because they brought them into the grocery store, and then they moved them to a church that is behind the store, and then we had to go there, and they had to get checked out from this church. And so it was like a giant line of parents, and it's not a small school. It's probably 2,000 or 2,500 people, students, I mean. So right. It took a while to get everyone out of there.
Right.
So like this event for you sounds like an inflection point, right? Where we realized, wow, there's something like what's happening here in our society that is causing these terrible events.
Right. It was. And the other thing is like our high school in our area is also like top 1 or 2 counties per capita for suicides, which doesn't make sense either. So these 2 events kind of, they were an inflection point for me, like thinking about people that are well, this doesn't happen. And I don't know if we can make everybody well, but I think that people that are well have the capacity to empower others because they know themselves.
Yes.
And they understand where they're at.
Yes.
And then they have the ability to connect with other people in the community. And I think when people connect with one another in a real fashion, they start to feel less isolated, and then they're less likely to kind of embark on these extremist actions or go down that road. And that's sort of a hunch. I mean, there's a lot of psychology that goes into that I'm not an expert in, but
we don't claim to be experts here either. We do have a lot of hunches, and we follow a lot of breadcrumbs just to keep the conversation open. I think being a student of this is probably the most valuable possible way you could spend your time.
Right.
So Alex, like, obviously, like you went through that terrible event, right? You became interested in wellness and mental wellness and helping others. So why did you start the Twin Cities Wellness Collective?
Yeah, so a lot of it stemmed from those events, in that I think that we needed to build a community where we can I say ignite well-being, create a movement of well-being in our city. And this is the community that I'm in. And I think that it's important to be rooted in a place, and that can kind of create communities that empower one another and lift each other up. So the Twin Cities Wellness Collective came from that place a little bit. And then I read this book, Well-Being, the 5 Essential Elements, which is by Tom Rath, who's of course, the Gallup researcher that does a lot of work with strength finders. And the other author is Jim Harder. And that they both work for Gallup, and they do a study of 150 countries to see what makes a life well lived. And they boil it down to these 5 elements, which are social, occupational, physical, financial, and community. And so it's pretty well-rounded. And they then ask, well, how well are people doing in these areas? And at the time of the study, 66% of people were doing well in one of the 5 areas.
Wow. And just to say the areas again, you said social, occupational, physical, financial, and community.
Correct.
So 66% were only good in one of those categories, and not all the same category, obviously.
Right. And only 7% of people in the study were doing well in all 5 of them.
Wow.
So obviously, like, being well in a holistic manner is uncommon, and I don't think it should be that way. And I felt convicted when I read that, and I'm like, there's a lot of room for improvement.
Yeah.
And I think I've experienced this by the way that, like, some of the things I was discussing before, like, that is what it's like to be unwell.
Yeah.
So how can we move to being well and holistically? And I think a lot of times, like, people hear wellness and they're like, oh, that's like drinking green juice and going to the gym. And I'm like, that's just a little piece of it. And it's so much bigger than that. Like, we can't just think about one thing. And also, to be well as a whole person, you need a lot of different perspectives, because like, even if you think about physical, like, you have to know like how to like exercise, but it also involves doctors and
Yes, right.
like, there's so many different experts that fit into just that category. And there's so many people that can fit into these, or just like occupational well-being. Like, there's so many people that can help in that. And it's such a diverse body of knowledge that's required to help people be holistically well. So we needed to bring together a community of individuals with sort of wisdom and expertise in multiple areas to lift one another up. So that was kind of how this community was born. And I just started inviting people to it, and we had events and podcasts and that sort of thing. So
And you now have
That's really cool.
thousands. Yes, there are now thousands of people that are behind this movement, so to speak. I really like some of the stuff that you're saying. Before we move past this, I want to just come back to a couple of the things that you mentioned. You were talking about, all the different ways in which we can become well, and you look at these different tenets, or socially or physically, we can talk about going from a place of being unwell to being well. And JJ and I talk a lot about this in the self-awareness journey, is how can we get out ahead of this stuff so that we are proactively working on things, not when we're broken, or not when we're overly sad or already invested in something that's challenging. I think that's a really critical component, is that proactivity versus the reactivity. And really, I think for that whole wellness, as you're talking about, there has to be both, right? There has to be both.
Right. Yeah.
The first thing that, like, when you're going through the list here, and I was reflecting, like, am I hitting all of these marks? Like, the answer is no. First off, I'm in that 66% probably. But the thing that struck me was that I feel like sometimes I focus on some of these areas in different, like, sort of seasons of my life. Like at some points I was probably very career, like, more focused on career and my well-being in my career. Sometimes I'm more focused in my physical well-being. But I don't know that I've ever been in a state where I'm actually spending equal amounts of, like, energy on all 5 of these traits, or all 5 of these elements, right? That's really interesting to think about, just sort of like the human nature, or maybe it's just my nature of being kind of like focused. It's easy to focus on a thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, this summer I'm going to get super fit, right? You just kind of everything around physical well-being, right? And you forget about all the other things for a while. So this idea of trying to become, like, stay conscious of all of them all at the same time, certainly would be a practice.
Yeah. And JJ, it's interesting that you bring that up, because there's a popular book that a lot of people know, The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, I think is the way you pronounce it. But he cites in that book some work by some Australian scientists. I can't remember their names, but they put people in these sort of experiments where one of them is like, okay, you're gonna go to a group workout class in the morning. And that's all they did. That's all they changed, is they went to this group workout class in the morning. And it's interesting because as they did this, they smoked less, they ate better, and they spent less money on things they didn't need. They had budgets. So it's like they made this one decision that was just in physical well-being, but it kind of spread into other areas of their life. So sometimes just having one habit that is helping you to be better in one area. And you can argue that like just working out actually has a lot of impacts on like how you show up at work, and how you show up for your family, and all these sorts of things. But it bleeds into other areas. And then they said, well, let's make a different group of people take a budgeting class. And so these people took a budgeting class, and it turns out they smoked less, they drank less, they used their money better, and they worked out more. So again,
That's
we
super
saw the same
interesting.
sort of thing happen twice, in different ways. So, and I have this happen, or I ask this question at the end of all of my podcast episodes, which is, what does well-being mean to you? And if you could only do one thing for your well-being, what would it be? Because sometimes you can really only focus on changing one thing at a time. And you can't say like, I'm going to like show up at work better, and I'm going to work out, and I'm going to change the way I eat and change all these things. It doesn't work. So yeah, pretty interesting.
That's super interesting. And again, just I want to make sure that we're talking about what is that, because I want you to ask that question at the end of our pod today.
Sure.
The two-prong question. But again, it's social.
Oh no, I didn't know that there was going to be a quiz at the end. Get my notebook out.
So social, occupational, physical, financial, and community. So those are the five again. And the other thing I was just thinking as you were talking, it's people, when they start to make a focused effort on one thing for themselves, I have a very strong belief that whatever we're doing for ourselves, we're doing for everyone. And I believe that because the lens in which we look at things impacts the way things are. Everything looks a certain way because we're creating our own realities. And we're doing that through our own lens, which is coming from our core belief systems and what we're valuing. And I really think that when we just take some time, and I don't even think it takes a lot of time, to decide that we would like to improve something in ourselves, we are improving it for everyone, because we become that example. We become that, as a student, we become the teacher, and it can change it for everyone, not just ourselves. And I think that's a really amazing way. We're so connected to each other, and people no, they don't like to, that's not right. People often forget that when something happens to one, it happens to all.
Right.
Yeah, that I was gonna circle back to something you said earlier in your original story, Alex, where you had said that you had talked about people feeling isolated, right? Like isolation as a mental, like as a condition that causes like pain and suffering and people to do tragic events, right? What I thought is like interesting about the list of career well-being, social, financial, physical, and community, is like a thing that I wonder as the world seems more connected than it has ever been. It also seems like people feel isolated more than they've ever been. And, maybe for only a few of us on the call, we remember a time before cell phones and internet and all that good stuff, right?
You're talking about me, aren't you, JJ?
Yeah. No, there was not internet when I was a kid.
Okay, right. Yeah. Okay. Appreciate
for a minute. But I think that's really interesting, right? I think that we probably all agree that feeling connected, feeling part of the community, and Melissa was bringing it even farther to say, hey, like a fundamental worldview that we are all connected in maybe a way we can't, see. But there's this like almost this whole isolation feeling happening all over the world. What do you think about that? What are your thoughts on isolation?
Yeah, that's a great question, and such a a prevalent issue. I think that,
especially since we all been like locked down on COVID for the past year and a half, right?
right.
Being being even more physically isolated than ever before.
Yeah, COVID made this like exponential, and it was a problem before this. You can even find like studies by Cigna before the pandemic that shows that isolation is at like this all-time high. And this is a health insurance company that's studying isolation as something that's threatening to our health in some ways. And part of the reason in the name, the Twin Cities Wellness Collective, collective is a group, like what Melissa was talking about, like sort of if we do something for ourselves, like it affects us all and it affects other people. And so that collective name is intentional in that we want to have this be something where people are participating together. And so that was part of the hope, is that we could bring people together in ways where they can authentically connect. And I think that's important in combating isolation, because we have all of these sort of surface level connections where we talk to people through the internet. Like we send them an email or a text message or a LinkedIn message or whatever it is. It's or we like their post. That's my favorite. Like that's a way to interact. Like not really. Like, because so
it gives
what does
a
it mean
false
to actually
sense. I think that gives a false sense of community.
Exactly. And how can we, a question that I'm always asking myself is, how can we build connections where people can like feel safe in showing up as themselves? Because they have to be able to authentically express who they are, to be able to feel well. Because if you're not doing that, if you don't feel safe to be you, then you can never really connect, and you'll always feel kind of out of whack.
Exactly.
Which ties into self-awareness hugely, because you have to know who you are. And be able to tap into that to express that.
Yeah, Alex, you're one of our people. I feel like you're our long lost brother.
Right.
Welcome to the family, man. Aren't you so happy?
I feel happy here.
So,
I feel like I fit in.
You did. Authentically, you absolutely fit in. So, Alex, when you read that book and you were impacted enough, moving to the Twin Cities, starting a career, starting your life sort of over again after college, and you began to create this collective in this group, what did you feel you wanted to work on in yourself first? Did you have key things that you were focused on?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I always felt like I was an athlete in college and in high school and kind of my whole life. So I always felt like I was doing well in the physical realm. But I I always wanted to build more community, and whether that was, and I think because that goes beyond myself, I wanted to build something that had contribution to where I was, and to this place. So that's kind of what I was working on through the Twin Cities Wellness Collective. Probably the most important piece for me and over the last 5 or 6 years or however long I've done this, was that community piece, and bringing people together and creating something where we can interact with one another. And I always say empower people, empower others. And so that's something that has been on the forefront of my mind for a long time. And I think when people are in real community where they feel supported and empowered, then they're less likely to, or they're just more likely to build others up too. I think it's less about prevention, which is what I almost said, but it's more like this cyclical positive effect.
Yeah.
Like
Yep.
if Melissa and Alex and JJ, if we're all in a supportive community and then each of us go and bring 3 more people into our supportive community, and then they do that, it's sort of like the spiraling effect where we're able to lift one another up in a positive manner.
That's
and
fantastic.
that has enormous sort of impacts for society.
It does. And I think too that the more that we have that collective and it's an authentic connection within that, it allows people, it's just like JJ and I say, self-awareness is your emotional, spiritual, mental, and physical bodies are in complete alignment. And when you're like that, you're in your centered space and you can go and you can create, you can be, you have easier relationships. It's easier for you to have money. It's easier for you to have all the things that you want, because you feel safe and because you feel centered and stable. And a whole community of people like that is what we wish for as well in the self-awareness journey. That's really what our mission is too. We use a slightly different vernacular, but it is the same energy and it is the same hope and desire.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Very cool. Yeah, the thing that I like about what you're building here, Alex, is like sometimes when people talk about like mental wellness, obviously there's been like a
stigma.
movement around like meditation and mindfulness, right? But that practice, I mean, even though I've practiced it, like that's just about like sitting quietly, kind of like understanding yourself. But the elements you're talking about are very practical, right?
Yeah.
And some people, when you say, hey, a key to mental wellness is mindfulness. So go sit quietly in a room by yourself for 30 minutes every single day. People are like, oh my God, that sounds terrifying. But this community that you're building, I love it because it's like everyone's got a career, everyone's got social stuff and financial and physical stuff. And it feels very approachable, unlike some other wellness things that feel a lot like less approachable. And the rooted in the community stuff is really great.
Yeah. Alex, is there anything that we didn't ask you about that you wish we would have?
I don't know, but I will say this, because I referenced earlier that I always ask people, what does well-being mean to them? And on my podcast, so I've asked that, I don't know, 100 some times. And I think this ties into self-awareness because every single person's answer is different.
Yeah.
So even though like we talk about these models of like social, occupational, physical, financial community, that's sort of like our foundation. But as a person to be well, you also have to make it your own. So like JJ, you were saying like some people like meditation and I am not one of them. Like that doesn't work for me. But if it works for someone else and it helps them to feel grounded and in some way, like they should do that. And if there's something that works for them, like they should move in that direction. But I think the foundation is like, how can you make your well-being your own? And that makes you proactive in it, because once you own it, you can start taking action. And I think it's sort of these things that we do on a routine basis. I always talk about habits on our show, like what are the sort of building blocks that we can use to increase our well-being. So I think that's really interesting though, that everyone has their own unique definition.
Yeah.
And we need to figure that out on our own. Like no one else can give you that.
Yes. And you don't have to
and
pick up someone else's just because they're having a good experience in their own.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because so often like people are like, what are the best practices? Like, what, like Melissa, like what's your best practice? And let me put that in my life. But
a lot of
it's
candy, a lot of candy.
like, if I had a lot of candy, that might make me crazy.
Well, there you go.
So it just like depends. Like you just have to figure it out for yourself and run with it. So
yeah,
that's my parting thought.
Yeah, I think we actually I think last week did a podcast episode about like your why, discovering your purpose, which is a very difficult activity. This feels like, again, like one of those activities that for some people might come really easy, right? And some people will really have to think about it. What are the things that are important to them, and what are those activities and habits that do enhance their well-being?
And I think too, it isn't even just thinking about it. It is feeling your way into well-being. It is the feeling. Can you connect with what you are feeling? If you look at these and these 5 guideposts, right? It's like when you look at them, how do you feel about that word as it relates to in your life? How do you feel about where you are financially? And can you separate the extreme expectation that you put on yourself for some out there goal versus what actually is fine for you? Like what makes you feel like you're in a good spot? Because I think, to me, that's the whole key to being able to stay in this gentle swing, back and forth into that wellness, rather than we put so much pressure on ourselves as humans to have everything perfect and do these things right. And if I can't do them perfect, I'm not going to do them at all. And I think that's where a lot of people get stuck. And I don't think it has to be like that at all.
Right. I love that point. It's so important for us to not get caught up in the, whether you call it conventional wisdom of the world or society's expectations on us. You need to know what feels right for you and lean into that and do it unapologetically.
Yeah. And
so many.
Yeah. And I think there is an element to what JJ's saying that is truth. Like we do have to be able to discern, we have to think about things, discern kind of what we've been doing, how we've been thinking about it up until now. But I think then it's a combination of that thinking and feeling again.
Well, I'm just going to go ahead and delete the JJ's mental wellness spreadsheet that I just made. So I guess that's not useful.
I heard ticking, and I just thought, please don't let that be a spreadsheet.
I just made a rubric real quick to calculate my happiness.
That's awesome.
Well, Alex, this has been a super fun conversation. Yeah. Is there one last question you want to ask us before we part ways?
Sure. I think you know what's coming, but it would be, what does well-being mean to you? And if you could only do one thing to improve your well-being, what would it be?
Who's going first?
I'm not going.
I'm not. Okay. Well, okay. I was thinking that like well-being to me, actually that's what it means, but I was going to answer contrary to my spreadsheet statement about how it feels, right?
Yeah.
When I feel like the best, I'd say, like I feel centered, right? It's just like I just feel content. I feel like safe and supported. And I feel productive. Like I feel like I'm like producing and adding to the world.
Darn it, I should have gone first.
Oh yeah, I stole all yours.
That's so good though, JJ. Like all kidding aside, that's just like we always say, put the cookies on the bottom shelf, and I feel like that's right there. It's just like it's very easy and approachable, and it's just checking in with yourself to know when you're feeling well.
Mm-hmm. And what's the one thing that I do? Was that the second question?
Yeah, that's the second part.
That's a good question. That's why I needed a spreadsheet. Actually, you know what? One of the things that has been extremely helpful in my life to work on my own well-being is doing a podcast with my friend Melissa, which kind of goes to what you're saying, Alex. It's like actually the community and the sharing part, and the podcast in my life has actually like made great conversations with my wife and my friends and my mom, right? And it's actually so I'm not saying everyone should go off and do a podcast, but for me personally, it has been the center point around a lot of the work that I've been doing personally.
Mm-hmm. That's really good and very powerful. Because you know why I think it's powerful is because you know what it is. A lot of people, I think, if you were to ask them, what's the one thing that I don't really know? What does it mean to me? Well, I don't know. What did you just say it was again? And then, we jump into our brains and try to create this mission statement. And I would say for me, what well-being means is that I am able to connect. My relationship is with me first, me and my higher power. And for me, that's God. But that I am connecting with me first. And if I'm good with me, then I am able to be in partnership with everyone else in a much more kind way and supportive way, and to help, like to continue to help the planet in any way that I can. That's what well-being means to me. And what is the one thing that I do? That's hard for me to say one thing because it's so forefront in my mind. But again, it's my profession as well, right? I'm in coaching. I love being in partnership with people. So I would say the one thing is I really want to continue to be good with me so that when I'm a partner for other people, I'm adding to their lives. I'm not taking something from their lives. So that's probably the one thing. It's just that constant focus of relationship with me, relationship with others. What does it mean to you, Alex? And then we'll quit. We'll say good day.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like my definition is always evolving, which is another thing that's important is well-being is not an endpoint, but a spectrum. It's a journey that we're all on together.
Yeah.
And I think well-being to me means living authentically and unapologetically, but also knowing, like, I think there's a caveat to that. Like, you have to think about other people when you're, or at least I do, because I want to think about how I am in a place, how I can build others up too. So a lot of well-being to me is feeling like I'm making a contribution, and to which both of your answers have included as well, but I want to think about how can I make a contribution that positively impacts others and impacts the city that we're in and the community that we're in, and even beyond that. And so that's something that I think is really paramount to me feeling well. But to be able to do that, you have to have, you have to take care of yourself too, and make sure that you're understanding yourself and how you show up, so that you can actually do things that bring a positive contribution. And if I could do one thing for my well-being, it would be, I think it would be building community. And that is going out into the world and having conversations like this that aren't afraid to be real and delve into things that make us human, and even things that are hard, and acknowledging that and not trying to hide it because I'm trying to craft some sort of image that I think people will appreciate, or that our society is more prone to accept. So I think that's really the one thing that I would do.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
So Alex, if people want to learn more about the Wellness Collective, get involved, where do they find you?
Yeah, so they can find everything on our website, which is www.tcwellnesscollective.com. And then we also have LinkedIn and Facebook groups by the same name, the Twin Cities Wellness Collective. So if you want to participate on social media in our groups, that is a way to connect as well.
And they can listen to your podcast of the same name.
Yes, which is also on the website. Yeah, and you can find it on any platform that you listen to podcasts on. So, yeah.
I cannot thank you enough for your time today. I have really enjoyed our conversation.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed being here.
Thanks, Alex.
We hope that you've enjoyed today's episode. Our mission is to help people become happier and more effective by gaining insight into their own thoughts and feelings. We'd love your support. First, share this podcast with anyone you think might enjoy it. Second, leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast site. This helps others discover the podcast so we can reach more people. And third, sign up for our newsletter at theselfawarenessjourney.com. This will help us communicate better with you and build our community. Thank you so much for joining us in the Self-Awareness Journey. We'll see you next week.